All right, all right, all right. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? Always with the technical difficulties, guys. Always with the technical difficulties. I don't get it. You update stuff and stuff just doesn't work like it's supposed to, but we are here. We are here. Make sure you are giving the thumbs up, hitting the notification bell, and subscribing. It's free. And I am so glad to be here with you guys today to bring you some more truth. And the truth we're talking about today is somewhat of a plan, right? So everybody has a protection plans. Nations do, governments do, churches do, and families do. If you don't, something's wrong. But the question isn't whether if you have one or not. The question is whether it's protecting the things that matter the most to you. And tonight, we are talking about military readiness, international diplomacy, religious freedom, education, and the cost of leadership. Because every one of these stories that we're talking about tonight focuses on a aspect that pushes us to ask the same question. What exactly are we trying to protect? So tonight, I'd like to welcome you guys to TimberTalk, Navigating the Political Forest, where we're about to get into some good stuff. Tonight's episode is the protection plan. And I think this has the potential to be one of the more cleaner and more professional episodes that I've done in a while. So hopefully you guys sit back and relax and enjoy it. And our Bible verse tonight comes from Psalms 127:1. And it says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchmen wake in vain." So this simply means that if you aren't doing what you should be doing and what you're called to be doing, especially in the aspect of the country, you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing and you're wasting your time. And it's all vanity and vexation. So let's go ahead and jump in with prayer, and we're going to get right to it. Dear Heavenly Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for this awesome and most fantastic opportunity to praise your name and lift you on high, God. We thank you for this opportunity to tell the truth and not wanting to be first, but to be correct in your name. Lord, we ask that everyone under the sound of my voice is blessed and highly favored, that you give them more than they can receive. Father, in Jesus' mighty name I pray, amen. All right, guys, our first story tonight is a doozy because everyone loves Barack Obama, right? Well, that might not be the case, especially when it comes to the cost of doing business, right? So the $850 million Obama Presidential Center is opening its doors this week in Chicago. Yeah, you heard me right. $850 million presidential center, whatever you want to call it, per se. I call it a sham, but it costs almost $1 billion, $850 million to build this and put this together. And it's, how long has Barack Obama been out of office? Yeah, it's opening its doors this weekend, but the celebration is being overshadowed by subcontractors who say they are still owed money. Yeah, not just any kind of money, but millions of dollars for the work they performed on the project. So several contractors claim that some of their design changes and delays and the project modifications that took place have dramatically increased the cost to them, right? So these subcontractors are kind of pissed off. And, you know, this has remnants of what they say about President Trump, about how he, in his heyday, didn't pay contractors and subcontractors, that he just cut ties and found roundabout ways to cut losses with these people so that they didn't get what they were supposed to get. This has remnants of that. Some companies report their losses in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, while others say they are owed millions of dollars. One plumbing contractor says his company is approximately $4 million in the hole, pun intended, after completing the work on the project. Now, according to the reports, some businesses are now facing layoffs, financial distress, and possibly bankruptcy because they ain't get paid. Now, personally, I find this to be appalling. Not Barack Obama, the most well-spoken president in the history of the United States. No. Not Mr. Obama, the man that is for the people. Not him not paying people. Well, here's the bigger picture. The Obama Presidential Center was promoted as more than just a museum. Not something that was just marking a historical point in American history. No, supporters described it as a economic investment in Chicago's South Side, a project that would create jobs, because the presidents love to tout out how they create jobs, right? It was supposed to generate opportunities, right? And help the minority-owned businesses grow. Yeah, because, Barack Obama was a president for the black people. At least that's what they were told. Many of the affected companies were minority-owned businesses that were originally told that the project would create economic opportunity within their communities and for their businesses. Helping the black community get a leg up. That's why these allegations are receiving so much attention now. And I might be breaking this to you first. You might not have heard this at all, but in the sphere that I hang out in, this is receiving big waves. And just in time for Juneteenth, right? That new black federal holiday, just in time for that. This story isn't just about construction. It's about promises. Yeah. Promises made, promises kept from Biden. Well, yeah. Barack Obama made promises. And it seemingly, according to these allegations, not being kept. The story isn't about Barack Obama in the sense of some people would like to make it. It's about accountability, right? Because somebody owes somebody some money. And, you don't like to play with people's money because people start to act funny when you play with their money, right? And everybody seems to be pointing at somebody else. You ever see that Spider-Man meme where there's 4 Spider-Men and they're all pointing at the other Spider-Man for who's responsible? Well, yeah, that's kind of sort of the thing that's happening. So the foundation that put this together says that they paid the contractor. Yeah. The contractor points to the project's complications. And the subcontractors are the ones that are being left to hold the invoices because they didn't get their money, right? And here's the problem. The bills don't stop just because somebody else hasn't paid. Employees still need paychecks. Suppliers still need to get paid. Equipment loans still need to be paid. Banks still expect their money, right? And that's the reality with these businesses and their dealings with how they handle things, right? What makes this story extra frustrating is that somehow the project was sold to the public, right? And for years, Americans heard about the opportunities that this would produce. This project would create ultimate uplifting for Chicago's black community, particularly for the minorities in the black community, not just the black community, because, you got some unmentionables there, but just the minorities that were trying to get their legs up and get their businesses started. Well, happy Juneteenth, if you believe in that sort of thing. Now, some of those same struggling businesses are reportedly struggling to survive after they helped build this monumental, historical, foundational building, museum, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. They try to make everything sound good and make it sound great, like it's amazing, but it's not. Because economic opportunity isn't just getting something or someone in the door. It's about making sure they get what's owed to them or get paid after the work has been done and the work was completed. And it according to this whole situation, the work was completed how it was supposed to be. And because of the delays, it took so long. Barack Obama's been out of office, what, 2012? We're now in 2026, 14 years. It took 14 years to build a museum, right? And if these people don't get paid, all the speeches and all the ribbons and the ribbon cuttings and all the grand openings and celebrations in the world won't mean much to the guy wondering how he's going to make payroll next week. This is giving the same kind of energy that most people give to Trump from when he was a private citizen dealing with his businesses. This is giving strange, very strange. So I'm wondering how this will be resolved, because again, the Obama Foundation that put this all together is saying, hey, you guys got paid. This has nothing to do with us. Talk to the contractor. And the contractor's like, wait a minute. We didn't get everything we were supposed to get. And subcontractors are like, hey, well, we paid for all of this stuff on the promise that we were going to get paid, and we ain't got paid. Now, this seems to be another besmirchment on Chicago, and a big black eye, pun intended, on Barack Obama. All the nice speeches in the world's not going to get you out of this if these people don't get paid. And I would believe that this center is probably going to be defaced quite quickly, maybe even broken into and vandalized, because these people haven't gotten paid. And I wouldn't fault the people for doing this. I mean, they already act like buffoons in this area anyway. So what's to stop them from acting out because they didn't get their money? It calls for accountability and real responsibility to be upheld. It really does. It really does. And the moment that they don't do that is the moment that we fall into a place where we can't trust leadership, right? And speaking of leadership and responsibility, world leaders, gathered at the G7 this week to discuss another question. Who's responsible for bringing stability back to the Middle East? Well, Donald Trump says I'm the boss. Yeah. I don't have the video of him saying that. I should have grabbed it, but I didn't. You guys have probably seen it, but that's not totally what this segment is about, because there's some other things that might spin off into a special episode here in the next coming weeks. But President Trump arrived at the G7 summit in France, and the big talk of the town was the ongoing conflict in Iran, and that dominated much of the entirety of the G7 meeting. The summit came shortly after Trump announced a proposed, again, keyword proposed, agreement aimed at ending the U.S.-Iran conflict. Now, this somewhat restores faith to me that Trump really is anti-war like he initially said. And I know he said no new wars, and I gave him his grief for that, but we're here, we're doing it. Now we have to get out of it. So this restores faith that he really didn't want to be there in the first place. And from my perspective, as someone that does dive deep into politics, he had no choice. His hands were tied. And it's not an excuse. This is the same thing for every other president when it comes to dealing with Israel, right? Because we have treaties. We have contractual obligations. We have memorandums of understandings with this nation that say we're going to help out. We're going to step in and help out when it's needed, where it's needed. And Trump found out the hard way that he can't just say and do what he wants to do when it comes down to contractual obligations, especially ones that he didn't write, and especially federal and national and nation-to-nation contractual obligations. So according to the reports, the agreement would reopen shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz. It would also extend a fragile ceasefire involving Iran and several of its regional allies. And we're going to talk about that particular part in a second, right? So the proposal also reportedly includes the possibility of future sanction relief if Iran meets certain nuclear related conditions. Oof, oof. Now that's a big one, right? Now, Iran has already kind of sort of looked at this deal and kind of said, hey, we're digging this, right? But this has to be accepted by everyone. Now, it was all the rage and all the talk at the G7 summit with Trump, right? It was huge. Everybody loved it. However, now even China and Russia are on board with this. And these are two allies, major allies of Iran. But Trump's going to have to impress these buffoons we call the United States Congress as well, because they have some concerns, right? So the agreement is expected to be signed in Switzerland, of all places, Switzerland. I'm Switzerland. I don't want no part of this. Yeah, it's supposed to be signed there, right? So leaders from the G7 nations publicly backed the effort because if you guys remember before, when Trump initially went in on Iran with Israel, the UN said, hey, we don't want any part of this. And I can understand why, because look at the prices of gas and other things in these other nations. What it would take to fill up a 30-gallon tank in the United States, being roughly around $112 to $130, depending on where you're living, would be double that in most of the UK and most of Europe, actually. So they don't like that. They don't like the fact that they're paying double the prices when they were already paying high prices as is, right? So many of the leaders describe this as an important step towards stabilizing global trade, which has disrupted that in its entirety, and improving security in the Middle East. The Iran negotiations overshadowed most of the issues at the summit altogether, kind of like the Russia versus Ukraine thing, completely overshadowed. Now, Trump also met with the Indian Prime Minister here, which was somewhat of a highlight here. He met with the Indian Prime Minister, and I'm kind of sort of, if you guys have been following me for any amount of time, I'm kind of sort of tired of hearing about India because it seems like we're kind of always close to making a deal with them. But according to both sides, the United States and India are moving closer to a new trade agreement. They've been doing this since 2025, since Trump's taken office. But the bigger picture here is the Strait of Hormuz. It remains one of the world's most important waterways for the Middle East and mainly for Europe and the European nations. But it's overall affecting us as well, right? Because it's the place where all the shipping lanes are. Roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through this narrow corridor. And any disruptions there immediately affects global energy markets and shipping costs and economic stability. And this is why a lot of the world has been mad at Donald Trump, right? This is why a lot of the world has been saying, why are you doing this? We didn't support this. This is one of the reasons why the UN didn't back this move, even though they've been pushing the United States, according to the intel from Israel, to stop Iran and their efforts of having nuclear weapons, which coincidentally, just like the global war on terror, no weapons of mass destruction have been found, right? And then you have Pete Hegseth sitting there when he was grilled by Congress to say, we're trying to stop the ambitions of Iran from having nuclear weapons. First and foremost, the only way to stop an ambition, because it's an immaterial thing, Pete Hegseth, is to destroy all of those people. Are you going to do that? Yeah. I don't think you're going to do that. That's why leaders around the world have been watching this conflict so closely. The G7 support matters. And I know if you guys have been following Trump, he pulled out of the G7 a while ago because he felt like the United States was being disrespected, and they were. And then Biden put us back in it, and Trump didn't want anything to do with it within 2025, but he jumped right back in it in 2026, right? Because he needs to know what the world thinks. And this proposal through this Iranian MOU would make headway for a lot of things. Now, I hear, and I've talked to several people that said the JCPOA was substantially better and all of this other stuff. However, the JCPOA had no real contingency plans for if Iran didn't follow suit, right? This plan right here through this MOU would net Iran $300 billion. And if it's continued to be signed like the Israeli MOU, they would continue to receive that money over the course of time, probably about $3 billion a year. for every 10 years. Now, that would also include reparations, and a restitution. Reparations being for the country to be restored, and a restitution for the family members that lost their children, which America seemingly still hasn't taken responsibility for. It's kind of just been swept under the rug, left alone, which neither here nor there as long as they do their due diligence, right? But ultimately, this signals that many of America's closest allies want stability. They want restoration as quickly as possible. At the same time, Iran's agreements have historically faced skepticism in Washington because they violated just about every one. However, Israel has also violated some of these ceasefires as well. Because if you guys are paying attention, you know that Benjamin Netanyahu kind of sort of wants to continue this business as usual and has been called weak, or Trump has been called weak by Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu several times for not wanting to continue this, right? But remember when I said earlier, many of the lawmakers want to know what's going on? Many of the U.S. lawmakers remember previous negotiations that promised long-term stability, but eventually fell through. They did because of the instability in the Middle East. You're dealing with two groups of people that don't want to stop fighting. Neither one wants to lay down, and we just happen to be allied with one of them. That's one of the reasons some members of Congress are demanding a more public release of this MOU, so before they give their support. And honestly, I don't have much faith in Congress. This is my show, so I get to speak the way I want to speak. I don't have much faith in Congress because 253 members of Congress receive money from AIPAC, and even more of them receive funding from companies owned by individuals that have interest in Israel. That's a problem. That could be a conflict of interest, right? So the story is bigger than just Iran. It's bigger than just the G7. And honestly, it's bigger than Trump, because what we're really talking about is leadership. And what we're really talking about is the future of how America functions on the world stage. If this doesn't go off how it's supposed to, America could be caught up in another 20-year pointless and endless war that costs billions of dollars and maybe even thousands more Americans' lives. Your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your mothers, your fathers, your nieces, your nephews, and in some cases, grandparents. All for what? We were told we're there because the Iranian people are crying out. That proved to be moot. We were told we're there to stop the oil going to Russia and China. That proved to be moot, which is crazier still because the JCPOA had China and Russia in agreement that Iran really shouldn't have nuclear weapons because they are unpredictable. Now, two of Iran's largest supporting allies said that they shouldn't have nukes. So why would we be needing to stop the oil flow to Iran and Russia, or China and Russia, if they're on board with the factors of Iran not having nukes from the JCPOA, and they're on board with this new MOU? Why would we need to do that? But then we were told it's to stop them from having nuclear weapons. Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Then we were told it's to stop the ambition of Iran from having nuclear weapons. Again, Pete Hegseth, you can't stop ambitions, baby. So why are we really there in the first place? One side seemingly wants to continue business as usual. The other side seemingly wants to become or return to America First ideologies and no new war ideology, right? For the last several weeks, people have been asking the same question. What's the plan? Where is this heading? And how does this end? Well, Trump is trying to put an end to it the best way he knows how. He's gotten in over his head. Now we appear to have some part of an answer. Whether you support Trump or not, the goal appears pretty clear. And this is the first time we've had some form of transparency, right? Got to reopen the shipping lanes, stabilize the region, and avoid another endless conflict in the Middle East. And that's something most Americans can agree on. If you can't agree on it, I question your allegiance to America. I question your birth in America, because maybe you can't see past the TDS to realize that this needs to happen. And for the fact that most people are saying that Trump is folding, you didn't pay attention in the first place. He didn't really want to be in this in the first place. If you recall, Lindsey Graham was a big proponent of going over there and doing things against all evidence. We have spent decades watching America get dragged into conflicts with no clear end in sight. At the same time, healthy skepticism is warranted. Iran has signed agreements before and violated. Israel has signed agreements before and violated. The United States has signed agreements before and watched them get blown up and go up in flames. And historically, the deals that looked good on paper failed in practice. That's why this matters. That's why transparency matters. And that's why Congress is asking the questions, but I have healthy skepticism for them because they could be on the dime, right? We just saw, which I just ran into this, Mike Huckabee, an ambassador, said that America wouldn't exist without Israel or the Jewish people. We have people in political power that believe this, and that is a problem. That shows allegiances elsewhere besides the place that they are supposed to be representing. This isn't about anything other than the fact that we need to fix things. And for the first time, this summit revolved around something that wasn't climate change, wasn't trade, wasn't Europe, but really putting an end to this. Because when global trade routes, energy markets, and regional security all are tied up in one area, everybody suddenly has a seat at the table. And I find this to be interesting. This story is shaping up to be very interesting in the long run. Very interesting in the long run. And I'm interested in seeing how it unfolds myself. I really am. And while we are sitting here, with world leaders talking on the big stage and protecting the global stability, or attempting to do so overseas, the administration is taking huge steps to reshape another institution here in the great United States. This time, it's the Department of Education. And this here is a follow-up because school's out for summer. The Trump administration has taken another step towards shrinking the Department of Education. And I can hear it now. No. We need it. Let's be real. Let's sit down at the table of logic. The Department of Education is the Department of Institutional Indoctrination. If you go look up the original definition of education, which has been changed multiple times to suit an agenda, education originally was coined at the prescription of the word as a systematic giving or receiving of instructions, usually in a school or collegiate institution. Now, instruction is defined as order. Systematic giving or receiving of orders. Now, that sounds like the military, right? And I would be more apt to agree with that. The military, the United States military, more specifically, is the most educated group in the world. They are given and receive instructions and follow them to the letter or to the best of their abilities. Why is this something that we are proud of in the United States? Well, under the new plan, 2 of the department's most significant responsibilities will be transferred to other federal agencies. Enforcement of federal civil rights will be transferred to the Department of Justice. So if you got a violation there, you're going to be dealing with the Department of Justice. Oversight of special education programs and rehabilitative services are going to be moved to the Department of Health and Human Resources. What's the problem? I can hear the left now. Their heads pop, pop, pop. No. I love being called uneducated. I am a very uneducated individual because I don't follow instructions very well. I will listen. I will learn what I can, but if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not following in the footsteps of fools that went before me. I'm not someone easily indoctrinated. It takes a bit of work to get me there. Have I ever been at one point in time in my life? Yes, but the older I get, the better I get, like fine wine. So this move follows Trump's long-standing pledge to reduce federal involvement in education and return more authority to the states and local school systems, as it should have been the entirety of the whole time. Because you can't make the circle go through the square hole, the triangle go through the square hole, the rhombus go through the square hole. Some of you don't know what a rhombus is. The pentagon through the square hole. Billy's hand through the square hole. And that's the type of mentality we have in the United States. We tied it. So I saw this amazing illustration of the American educational system. You have a tree in the middle of a field, and at the tree is an apple at the very top. And the goal was for the children, who were depicted as animals, to retrieve the apple. You had a monkey, you had a giraffe, you had a snake, you had a snail, you had a raccoon, you had a mouse, you had a horse, you had a zebra, you had all these animals surrounding the tree. Now, the giraffe is going to succeed very quickly because it just hops up there with its long neck. The elephant's going to succeed fairly quickly. It's going to be able to push the tree over and get the apple. The monkey and all these other animals that are capable of climbing are going to succeed very easily. But the snail and all these other animals that aren't adept at climbing will fail. The system is trying to push everyone through the same hole. And Trump is trying to rectify that. Back in the day, and I'm not that old myself, but back in the day, school systems were set up and tailored for what the system in the area in which the schools were excelled in. So if agriculture were your thing, it's not that you wouldn't learn about anything else, but you would learn agricultural things first. And if you wanted to learn some other form of facet of schooling, learn, not be educated, learn, you would be taught, not educated, you'd be taught things about that. So farming stayed what farming was. If you wanted to learn things about technological things, you move to a more city populated area because that's where they would have those types of things at. STEM programs, for example. But the administration officials say this transition will place responsibility with these agencies to who are better equipped to enforce laws and manage services. And that would save tons of money because the Department of Education has been receiving tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of federal money, and not much has changed. America's education system has dwindled. Our place in the world for education has dwindled. We're no longer cream of the crop. We are no longer at the top. The Department of Education was created in 1979, and a lot earlier than that, if you understand, and if you know, you know. But for decades, many of these conservatives have argued that the education decisions belong closer to the parents, teachers, not educators, and local communities. And that is factual. The Office of Civil Rights handles discrimination complaints in schools and universities across the country. So why was it a part of the Department of Education? Why did we have to go through a middleman to get to this particular department? So what happens if the complaint hits the desk of the Department of Education and never gets sent over to the Office of Civil Rights to be handled. That happened a lot. The ball was dropped a lot. Now we cut out the middleman and just go straight to the resource. Meanwhile, the Special Education and Rehabilitative Services Division helps oversee programs affecting millions of students with disabilities. Now, on the flip side, you have critics over here worrying about the change and how it could create confusion or weaken the protection for the students. How in the heck does it weaken the protection for the students when these particular offices are already receiving these complaints from the Department of Education? You're cutting out the middleman. These critics don't critically think. Their heads are stuck up their tuchus. Now, supporters are rebutting, saying that the responsibilities aren't being eliminated because some of the critics believe that they're being gotten rid of. They are simply being moved to the agencies that are specialized to handle these areas. The Department of Justice already enforces the civil rights laws for the nation anyway. HHS already manages major health and disability-related programs anyways. So from my perspective, this is one of the most asinine stories out there to be argued against. The headline sounds bigger than what's actually happening here. Some people hear this and think, hey, they're getting rid of the civil rights programs and protections in schools. They already got rid of the affirmative actions in schools, and blacks can't go to school and Asians can't. No, stop it. If you need affirmative action, you weren't smart enough to begin with. Really and truly, if you need civil rights protections, you weren't American to begin with. Let that sink in before you stop. Let that sink in what I just said. If you need civil rights protections, you weren't living under the Constitution in the first place because the Constitution already grants you the protections. Oh, he said something that hurt my feelings. Hate speech. There's no such thing as hate speech. It's only speech that you hate. I could say something like, hey, you look really nice today. And you be one of these weird tri-colored hair strangies that look at me. Oh, are you assuming my gender? No, I just said you look nice today. Oh, I'm offended. Now that instantaneously as a compliment becomes hate speech. But that's ultimately not what's being proposed here. They're not trying to get rid of things. They're trying to streamline them so there's less paperwork, less hoops to jump through. That's what's really being done here. And if you're not smart enough to conceptualize that, you're probably very educated. Because the only people I've ever heard argue that this is a good thing, that we need to leave the education system intact as it is, are educated people. People that have been indoctrinated by the very system to protect that system. And if you can't see the benefits of having certain areas exceed and excel in certain metrics that they're good at, well, I don't know what to say for you. We shouldn't be teaching a state like Indiana who excels in textiles and farming. We shouldn't be trying to force those people to do rocket science. It's just not something that they excel in. You shouldn't, at the same, be trying to take the city parts of New York City or the city parts of California and forcing them to do agricultural things because it's just not their stick. You can't go to the technology triangle of North Carolina and say, hey, we want you guys to work on cars and be mechanics. Well, that just doesn't work out. You can't force these people to do, and giving authority back to the local governments actually help them tailor education, as you call it, to better these kids graduating. Yes, reading, writing, and arithmetic is a must. But I shouldn't be forcing kids by the time they get into high school to learn something that they're not ever going to use. This actually will homogenize our education system, right? This is why Japan, China, India, Germany, France all have better education systems than we do because they're homogenized. Giving it back to the states and local governments will homogenize it because certain parts of the states are better at agriculture and farming. Other parts are better at engineering. Other parts are better at technology. Other parts are better at hunting, gathering, all these other things. Why are we trying to force all of these places to do the same damn thing? It makes no sense. And if you believe that to be okay, you don't make sense. And you're a part of the problem. You're a huge part of the problem. And while Washington is focusing on restructuring education and the education system, the administration is also taking steps to strengthen something else. Something that we've talked about once before on this show, something that should have been strengthened a long time ago, but we were too busy giving stuff to other nations. Well, war production. We're strengthening war production. And this is something that should have never have been drowned out in the first place. But it was because we were too busy doling out some of our best to other nations. Oh, well, Lumberjack, they only gave them old weaponry. Yeah, giving them old weaponry that works while the new weaponry is hard to come by because we don't have the chips and the infrastructure and all this other weird stuff. And that we don't have the oil supplies to create the fuel, right? I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, President Trump has invoked the Defense Production Act, which was commonly known as the DPA. Now, this law is old. It's a Cold War law, right? And it gives the federal government expanded authority to coordinate with private industry. And we all know that private industry is substantially better than the federal government at anything and everything, right? Right? Well, they're getting to be able to be used by the federal government for national security and emergencies. The move comes as concerns grow about the U.S. military stockpile, which if you, again, follow me for any amount of time, you know we covered this, that the stockpiles are low. They're below half. That doesn't make us feel very comfortable. So the U.S. military stockpiles amid tensions in Iran are looking even more scarce. And the border, well, the concerns are there too because we don't have the stockpile. We're caught with our pants down, so to speak, right now. And according to the administration officials, the Pentagon has identified major weaknesses within America's defense industrial base. Those weaknesses reportedly include limited manufacturing capacity, which we have covered before, fragile supply chains, which we have covered before, and bottleneck productions, which we have covered before. More specifically, bottleneck production with critical military components. Now, among the items receiving attention the most within this little soiree of things are solid rocket motors. Oh, can't get those rockets in the air if the motors ain't there. Missile guidance systems, can't aim them right if those aren't there. And igniters, can't make them go boom if those aren't there. And there are some other components used in modern weapon systems, more specifically those chips that we always talk about, you know, chips. Biden created CHIP Act. Trump made some factories. Biden made a factory. Everybody's happy. Chip. Taiwan, chip. Yeah, those. This order allows companies to enter a voluntary production agreement to improve coordination across the defense sector. Most Americans never think about where missiles come from or how long it takes to replace military equipment. But modern weapon systems often require years of manufacturing in advance. And if they go low, we got a problem. We don't have any more boom booms. You know, bombs over Baghdad. We can't do that if we ain't got them. Many of the components involved are produced by a relatively small number of specialized suppliers. The Pentagon officials have warned for years, even at the end of Trump's first term, for years, that America's defense manufacturing capacity has shrunk since the Cold War. And it became very apparent at the end of Trump's very first term when they started giving crap to Iran, Russia, or not Russia, but Ukraine, and even Israel, when we were giving stuff to Israel when they had their little October 7th soiree with Palestine. Right? The concern isn't just about building weapons. It's about whether America could rapidly scale production during a major conflict. And we haven't been. It's been sucking us dry, and not in the pleasurable kind of way. This is one reason the administration is looking beyond traditional defense contractors. According to reports, major manufacturers, engineering firms, and auto market, you heard that correctly, and supply chain companies have all been approached. General Motors has already begun discussions with Lockheed Martin regarding defense-related productions. So this is one of those stories that most people will overlook. Until we start getting our butts kicked. Yeah. Why aren't we doing more? Well, we ain't got more to do more with. But they probably shouldn't look past this. They shouldn't, but they can't. They can't help it because they love their serotonin and dopamine hits. Oh, every time the government does something and the news puts it out, I just feel good. Because wars aren't won when the shooting starts. Wars are won long before that. Wars are won through preparation. They're won through factories. They're won through supply chains. They're won by having the ability to build what you need when you need it in advance. For years, America has operated under the assumption that our industrial base would always be there. And it's dwindled substantially due to the 22-year GWAT that was a waste of time based off of intel from Israel that did nothing for anybody. Saddam Hussein in Iraq didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. We found nothing. We wasted our time. Bravo, George Bush. We wasted our time. And that cut heavily into our supplies. And the production couldn't keep up with the demand. And now we over here looking like Skeletor. We're looking like Skeletor when it comes to munitions and other things that are necessary to knuck if you buck when we get into it. But recent conflicts around the world have exposed the reality. It has exposed it. We can't keep supplying our allies. We can't keep supplying ourselves if we're not supplying any at all. Missiles run out, munitions run out, critical components run out, oil to make things run and go vroom vroom run out. And replacing them takes far longer than many realize if we're constantly in freaking conflicts. We don't have time to build up stockpiles if we're doing that and we're constantly in freaking conflicts. I'm not going to go to why we're constantly in conflicts. You guys know why. The administration isn't saying America is prepared to invade somebody. They're saying America should be capable of defending itself and supporting itself and, unfortunately, its allies without discovering halfway through a crisis that they themselves have empty shelves. See what I did there? Got a slick tongue. I can rhyme sometimes. America used to be known for its arsenal. We used to be known as an arsenal, a living, breathing weapon, the nation that could outproduce any rival on earth. We were outproducing 10-1 combined nations. China couldn't keep up. Russia couldn't keep up. India couldn't keep up. France couldn't keep up. Germany couldn't keep up. Now we're falling behind the times because we keep falling in place of endless conflicts around the world, mainly the Middle East. Y'all get where I'm saying. Y'all get where I'm saying. Not what I'm saying, where I'm saying. If you're listening, if you're here, you're hearing it, and you're seeing it. This move feels like an attempt to rebuild some of the capabilities of America. This is America first. That's not weakness. That's preparation. And that's what makes America one of the most dominant nations on the planet, because we never fail to prepare, but prepare to fail. And in that preparation to fail, we prepare for success. And the only way you can do that is having what's necessary to arm yourself when it's necessary. Preparation matters. It matters so much so that we have always been good at it. We have always been good at it. But now it seems like we're failing to be good at it. Why? Because everybody else needs something that we have. Now it's time to put us first and everybody else on the back burner. And if you don't agree with that, I'm pretty sure there's some older generation still walking around that will let you know if America wasn't as prepared as it has always been, we might be speaking Guten Tagen instead of English. America stepped into World War II and shut it down because we were prepared, not because we saw a boat get hit. Nah, we shut it down because we saw what was happening. Maybe, depending on how you see history. All right? And we continue with war. Not just war as you know it, but the last segment of the main course of this show is war on Christianity. Yeah. You talk bad about the Muslims, it's Islamophobia. You talk bad about the Jews, and it's anti-Semitic. But what is it when people are talking bad about Christians? What is that called? Whether you believe in God or not, whether you're agnostic, atheist, or you're polytheist, I don't care. What is it called when you talk bad or act bad towards Christianity? It's called nothing. There is no special word. There is no phobia for when Christians are on the line. Christian communities in both Israel and Europe are reporting a rise in harassment, vandalism, and violence, targeting believers, churches, and Christian institutions. And according to reports from Israel, which is shocking, the Religious Freedom Data Center in Israel has documented already more than 88 incidents against Christians during the first part of 2026. If that pace continues like it is, the total could surpass the 181 incidents reported in 2025. Now, I can hear it now. Well, why does it really matter? There's so much going on. Semitism. Yeah, I said Semitism because it's stupid. Anti-Semitism is stupid. It's stupid. Just like Islamophobia is stupid. Right? And if you had a name for Christianity, that would be stupid too. It's hateful behavior towards ideologies, which should be squashed in any aspect. But we shouldn't promote one over the other, right? So reported incidents include spitting on clergy and regular people that proclaim the name of Jesus Christ, vandalism on property, cars, doors, buildings, harassment, and attacks on Christian holy sites. And these get physical as well, because I was told not too long ago, not Yeshua-phobia, that's crazy, but I was told some time ago, back on Resurrection Sunday or Easter, for those that don't know better, that Israel shut down the holy sites to everyone because of the war against Iran. And they were thinking about the safety of others, which is very strange because I have video proof that the Jews were in there worshiping at their holy site. It's broke down into 4 quadrants. There's one for Muslims, one for Jews, one for Christians, and one for Armenians. If you know, you know about the Armenians. But I digress. Yeah, they were there worshiping. I have video proof of that. I also have video proof of Christians being dragged out of that area, pushed out of that area, shoved down out of that area, hit by batons and shields by Israeli police department. I didn't see any Muslims receiving the same treatment, but Christians. A separate watchdog group in Jerusalem specifically has reported a significant increase in anti-Christian incidents. Meanwhile, we move over to Europe. Yeah. And they indicate that the hate crimes against Christians have continued to rise across multiple countries. Church leaders are calling for stronger protections. Yeah, see, more protections and greater enforcement actions and harsher penalties for those responsible. Now, when we get over here to good old Europe, the crown, it's Muslims harassing Christians. Muslims. So in Israel, you got Jews harassing Christians, and in Europe, you have Muslims. And if you know, you know. They're just cousins. Why is it that Christians always catch a fade? When people think about religious protections and religious persecution, they often think about places like China, North Korea, and parts of the Middle East and Africa, most certainly Africa, the continent of Africa, yeah, most certainly. Christians are catching a fade. Over 300,000 since 2012, Christians have been killed by Muslims. Yeah. I even had some wackadoodle tell me today that, and I have proof of this, that without Israel, we couldn't protect Christians around the world. But I digress. That's not what this is about. But concerns about anti-Christian hostility are increasing, and they're increasingly rising in the Western world. Not just that, it's happening here as well. And according to multiple religious freedom organizations, Christians and their communities have reported an increase in vandalism of churches and desecration of monuments and physical assaults. We saw what that one soldier in Israel did to the cross in Lebanon. We saw it. Oh, that's just one person. You can't blame a whole group of people on one person. We also saw what they did again to a statue. Not a cross, but a statue. Oh, you can't blame the actions on a couple of people. Well, I can show you video after video after video after video after video of rabbis and Jews spitting on Christians, pushing Christians, hitting Christians. They're all there, but we turn a blind eye to that because don't talk bad about the Jews. You can talk bad about any and everybody, especially Christians, but not the Jews. They've never done anything wrong. They're perfect. In Israel, Christian communities represent a relatively small minority of population. Yet many church leaders say the frequency of the incidents have become increasingly concerning. Across Europe, religious freedom groups have documented hundreds of incidents involving churches, Christian schools, cemeteries, and religious symbols. The concern isn't just the number of incidents. It's whether governments are taking it seriously. Because I guarantee you, if this was happening to Jews right now, then Benjamin Netanyahu would be up in arms. Matter of fact, he was up in arms when he mentioned that attack in Australia. And he didn't address the Australian government. He said the Western world needs to stand up to protect us. Nobody says that for Christians. This story should concern everybody. And I mean everyone, not just Christians, because religious liberty is one of the most foundational freedoms of free societies around the world. If people cannot openly practice their faith without fear of harassment, intimidation, violence, and just scrutiny, it's not like this is some type of freakish cult that they're messing and fiddle-diddling children. It's not doing that. This is you run into major issues when you don't have any attention on this or only pay attention to certain things. What really stands out for me here is where these reports are coming from. Africa, Europe, and Israel. Different cultures, different governments, different political systems, yet we're seeing similar concerns emerge. And Israel says that they're friends of Christians, right? Shouldn't be happening there. Of all places on the planet, it shouldn't be happening there. And that's worth paying attention to. Now, let's be clear. Not every incident is the same. Not every country has the same problem. And not every act of harassment comes from the same group. But the trend itself is difficult to ignore. Christians are being told to stay quiet. I just talked about last week how in India, that Christians are not being allowed to go gather water in certain areas or work in certain areas. Christians are being told to stay quiet and stay invisible. Keep your faith private while everybody else gets to worship and do as they please. This is, you can't have religious freedom for one and not others. I don't care what you believe in. Believe as you want to believe, as long as you're not putting your hands on others or harming others in some way, shape, or form, it's okay. Believe what you want to believe. But this is a blatant attack. I'm used to seeing stuff like this about solely the continent of Africa or China or North Korea, but not Israel of all places, not even Europe. Isn't the crown supposed to be Catholic? They're looking real Islamic over there now to me. Real Islamic. And I'll tie this in with my cultural critique as we slide into the last two parts of the show here. I'll slide this into my cultural critique. And I was going to go a different route with my cultural critique, but President Donald Trump has been one of the few presidents, if at all, the only president to ever stand up for Christianity. You guys should let that sink in. America used to be a Christian nation. Used to be. It's not anymore. We've gone too far away from what's right. And I'm not talking about political sides or ideologies. Some of these Republicans are just as disgusting. And whether you believe in Christianity or not, the morals that Christianity stands on are the moral foundations of this nation. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Simple commandments. Keep your hands to yourself. Fourth Amendment. I have the right to be secure in my own persons, papers, and personal effects. Mind your business. As long as I'm not harming you, you have no say over me. As long as I'm not harming others, mind your business. But for some reason, we've lost that. We've lost that. We've propped up sinful behavior. Let men and women parade up and down the street naked in front of children. I remember a time if someone did that, they'd be locked up for indecent exposure and exposing children to things that they shouldn't be exposed to. Absolutely crazy. America's culture has fallen. The further they get away from the Christian morals and values, you ain't even got to be Christian to follow those. Most of you do it anyway because it's instilled in your system from the Creator. You wouldn't believe that, but it is. But the further we get away from that and the more we move into depravity, we start okaying things like Islam in America, communism in America, both of which are antithetical to the moral foundations upon which this country was built on. And to round this all off, to break the seriousness and the monotony, we're going to take a stroll down to our ding dong of the day. So let's check that out.
No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind. Not this time. No one is getting left behind this time. How do we get there? Together or never get there at all.
Sweet baby Jesus. Apparently, this was the response. Now, allegedly, this was the response to the 250th birthday for the U.S. military, Continental Army in the United States, and the UFC event that took place at the White House. Apparently, this was a response to it. What in the blue hell is going on? That's 2 in a row, by the way, the singing and the dancing. No one's getting left behind this time. You're quite literally excluding anyone that doesn't believe like you. You ding-dongs. No one means no one, not some people that we don't choose. No one means no one, you ding-dongs. No one's getting left. Yeah, hold on. One more time for the one time.
No one is getting left behind this time. No one is getting left behind.
My God. No one is getting left behind. Are you having a seizure, ma'am? And then this tone-deaf dude, no one is getting left behind. And you got your token black guy up there, Happy Juneteenth, over there in the dreads. He's the only one that's got any rhythm. He might be the only straight one on the stage. I doubt it, but I digress. That's your response to the 250th birthday to the Continental Army of the United States of America? Why is it that there's this weird rivalry between the United States and those that hate the United States? That's what really is. You know, that's what it really is. Now, I know the Democrat or the Republicans started it with having an alternative Super Bowl, but that actually had merit. You had an individual performing at the Super Bowl saying that America sucks and all this other stuff, but without America, Bad Bunny or whatever the weirdo's name is wouldn't make the money that he makes. And now you have this weird thing that you, whatever you call that, on stage here in opposition to celebrating the United States. Now, personally, I don't like the physical use of the United States facilities for events other than the government doing what the government's supposed to be doing. I don't think you should have used the White House lawn for the UFC event. Y'all might disagree. You can disagree. You're free to disagree. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But I also don't think it should have been used for frolicking and pandering to trans and LGBT members either. I don't think the White House should have been painted in freaking rainbow colors and had a big rainbow flag in the middle, which is never supposed to happen, or have a rainbow flag higher than the U.S. flag, which is not supposed to happen. Don't think that should happen either. So if you're outraged about the UFC event, but weren't outraged by the frolicking and nudity of these weirdos on the Western lawn or whatever lawn it was on in the United States Capitol, then you are a freaking hypocrite. I think this place should be used for what it's supposed to be used for. How about Congress and the White House get busy doing something for the nation, right? Instead of entertainment. But that's my personal feelings, which I don't let out too much, but you get it. This has been a pleasure to bring you God's truth and reality today. It's been a pleasure. And you guys got to remember, you got to remember.
No one is getting left behind this time. No.
This has been TimberTalk. I'm your host, American Lumberjack, aka Frankie. And make sure you're not missing the forest for the trees. I'll see you guys next week.